Welcome back to Nick Shares. We are back. We're here with part 2 of the, Phase 1 Movie.2 of the DCCU, a project I've been working on, a series that's going to be going on. A series that began with the what if the DCU was structured like the MCU. Last month we did the Batman, and that was the first movie that was the equivalent of Iron Man, and this month it's going to be the equivalent of the Incredible Hulk. We're going to try to do this monthly, where, every month we're going to, every month you'll have a new movie or something. And so, another thing is that one thing that I'm really going to work on is, what's going to be interesting is once we get into the Disney Plus shows, this will be HBO Max shows, but that's a whole other thing. The point is, do you guys think I should do, separate episode videos or just a series or season overview? Comment down below what you guys think. But today we'll be doing the Incredible Hulk one. But unlike the Incredible Hulk, this film will get a sequel because it is a character that deserves multiple movies. This character will be getting a trilogy. And that character is Superman. This movie will be none other than Man of Steel, the next film. You guys saw the trailer. You guys know it's coming out. It won't have too much of a connection to the wider DCCU because, of course, the Incredible Hulk didn't have that much connection to it. But also, it's early on. We don't want to rush this whole world building. We world build in a few spurts. There'll be a few connections here and there. Specifically, a connection to Batman, which we'll get to when we get to. Of course, that would be a similar thing because Batman was the Iron Man of this universe. And, Batman will get a name drop. He won't actually appear, but he'll get a name drop. And that's, so So now that you've seen the cast and all that good stuff, we now give you Man of Steel, the story, and here we go. Dun 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 dun. We open on an oil rig that is exploding. The Coast Guard is on their way, but they're not confident. There is panic. The Coast Guard people are give each other fearful looks, and the captain says, "We can only pray for a miracle." Just then, a torpedo flies past them, heading straight for the oil rig. The Coast Guard looks in shock. As the torpedo lands on the oil rig, it's Clark Kent, not Superman. However, he is in a costume. He flies in, grabbing workers in the blink of an eye. Then he uses his X-ray vision to see multiple people in a burning room. He flies through the door. He flies through the debris, freeze breath, to put out the flames, and breaks through the door. He grabs the people and brings them to the Coast Guard cutter. He asks them if that's everyone. They realize the captain's still on the bridge. Clark races back to the bridge and finds the captain sitting and saluting. Clark tells the man to come with him. The captain refuses, saying, "A captain always goes down with his ship." Clark then says, "Not in this story." Clark grabs him and flies off as the last of the oil rig goes up in flames. The workers cheer and call him the torpedo. Clark laughs and flies away. He arrives at the Kent farm, where Martha Kent is waiting for him. He lands. Martha hugs him and tells him it's good to see him. This will be a scene with them just having a nice little conversation. We see a picture of the two of them with Jonathan Kent. Clark then looks at his watch, and he says that he has to go, and then he has his job interview with the Daily Planet. He races away, back to Metropolis. We cut to him arriving at the planet, walking into the office. He's constantly fumbling his stuff. He eventually arrives at the office of Perry White, who welcomes him, asking him questions, though they are odder questions than you'd expect. The questions are like, have you heard of the torpedo? How much experience do you have? And lastly, do you work well with others? He explains that Metropolis is lucky to have people like the torpedo. While Gotham has Batman, Star City has Green Arrow and Black Canary, Metropolis has the torpedo. He explains that any shot of the torpedo is front page news. Clark nods. Perry then says that Clark will be working with Lane and Olsen. Clark then looks at Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen at their desk. Perry notices this and says, "They're new too, so you'll fit right in." Clark walks over to the two and introduces himself, clearly awestruck by Lois. Lois says, "Welcome, hotshot." Clark responds, "Perry said you were new." Lois laughs, saying, "I've been working here for 5 years." She continues to explain that Perry never noticed them. She continues saying, if you don't have an interesting story, he forgets you even exist. She explains jokes on him. "I got a front page story. Thanks to my dad, I got access to a meteor strike in the Arctic." We then see a scene of the three bonding over experiences and music. Finally, they arrive at the Arctic headquarters of the DEO, Department of Extraterrestrial Operations. There, we meet General John Jones. Clark and the crew approach the site. Jones questions the crew on why they are there. The crew explains it's for the Daily Planet. Jones agrees and shows them around. He explains that weird stuff happened to anyone who came inside. They saw a person like a guy or a hologram of a guy telling them to leave. Clark sees a symbol on the side of the structure. This causes a flashback to where we see a young Clark Kent with Jonathan Kent. Jonathan brings him to a tarp and explains that he isn't human. He's special, unique. Then he lifts the tarp, revealing the pod, and on that pod is the same symbol. Jonathan explains that Clark's real name was embroidered on the side of the pod, but it's in a different language. Clark sneaks into the structure. There, a robot appears requesting his name. Clark says Kal-El of Krypton. Then a hologram appears of Jor-El. He looks at Clark. He's in disbelief. Then he comes to agree that this is his son. Clark asks him who he is. Jor-El introduces himself as his father. Jor-El explains everything. Jor-El was a scientist on Krypton. He foresaw its destruction, but no one believed him, not even his best friend Zod. Zod, however, was imprisoned for treason. Jor-El and his wife sent Clark in a pod to Earth to continue Krypton into a new age. Eventually, Krypton was destroyed, and Jor-El passed his consciousness to this ship. However, during this whole conversation, the others noticed Clark's disappearance, and John, Lois, and Jimmy ran in after him. Clark said it took him time when he learned his true name. The robot flew in, saying that there were intruders. As soon as the robot flew out, Clark realized the truth. Those intruders were his friends. He ran after the robot, saying he would continue their conversation later. We see John, Lois, and Jimmy get attacked by the robot, only to be saved by Clark, who is forced to reveal himself to them. The three are in shock. Clark tells them to not tell anyone. John agrees suspiciously without hesitation. Lois says they can talk about it later, and that she'd be willing to not rat him out. He thanked her, and the group left, although shaken nonetheless. We see a scene of Clark explaining to Lois and Jimmy in a less than impressive apartment who he is, or at least what he knows about who he is. Jimmy is impressed. Lois is in disbelief. She starts saying how she always believed that there were others out there in the universe. Clark chuckles, and they have a nice scene together. However, the scene is interrupted by a loud noise. Clark and the others run outside to see a massive ship hovering over the city. A giant is sent from the ship, and a giant beam is sent from the ship, and as it dissipates, a group of people appear. People cry out in fear. The leader of the group stares sternly. Dun, 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 dun. The leader looks around and announces his name. My name is General Drew Zod of Krypton. My planet was destroyed many years ago. One of its survivors is on this planet. He hides among you. Lois and Jimmy look at Clark. If Kal-El does not surrender himself to me, in the next 5 minutes, we will begin killing. Clark sneaks back to his suit to suit up. As Zod continues his speech, he is hit by Clark. Zod is sent flying into a Starbucks. Product placement. This will be the first fight between them. They should be evenly matched. Clark has no real training, and while Zod has experience, he hasn't fought in many years. They fly around the world and end up in the Arctic. General Jones looks in shock at the two Kryptonians battle. Zod starts firing his heat vision at groups of people. Clark stops him, but he just barely stops him from killing Corporal John Henry Irons, who is hit in the arm. Clark grabs Zod and sends him hurtling up into space. Zod flies in contact with the sun. This supercharges him. Zod uses full force and blasts Clark straight down into the Kent farm, conveniently. Zod lands, saying that Clark has shown potential. Zod will take his troops and leave, and under one condition. Clark joins him on his crew. Zod tells him that he has 48 hours until the invasion begins. Zod then flies off as Martha runs out to see Clark. She takes him inside. We see Lois and Jimmy driving to Smallville as they track a massive heat signature. However, they are stopped by a military convoy. And we see this group is led by General John Jones and General Sam Lane. Sam scolds Lois for not telling him that she had contact with an extraterrestrial. They have a talk about how Lois wanted to keep a secret. Lois and Jimmy agree to work with the DEO and military to find Clark. Meanwhile, in Smallville, Clark and Martha talk about what happened. Clark reveals about his real father, his planet. Martha explains that she and Jonathan wouldn't argue a lot, but telling Clark the truth would always be a heated discussion. We had a flashback to Martha and Jonathan having such of those talks. Clark says he's going to get some air. He walks to downtown Smallville. There, he sees an old friend, Lana Lang. They talk about old times and how Clark was always different or unique. They laugh for a bit. We cut to Zod's ship, where we see how Zod and Feora have a relationship, though they keep it professional. They talk about the future of Krypton. Zod says if Kal-El does not join us, then this world will be destroyed. He wants answers. I'll give them. Back in Smallville, Clark continues his talk with Lana until he hears Martha and the military. Clark leaves Lana and returns to the farm to find Lois, Jimmy, John Jones, Sam Lane, John Henry Irons, and the rest of the military at the farm with Martha. He asks what happened. John Henry Irons scolds Clark on everything. John and Sam explain why they were there, and that the world is changing. Aliens are becoming more and more of a threat. They want to know what Zod's weaknesses are. Clark says he barely knows about himself. He explains what Zod said about the 48 hours. Sam says then we better prepare for war. Clark says that he must prepare as well. He tells Lois and Jimmy to stay. He flies off. He returns to the Kryptonian ship, and speaking with Jor-El, explains that Clark can't trust Zod, and that Zod will do anything to complete his mission. Clark has a training montage of his learning from Jor-El how to use his powers properly. He learns about the sun and what it does to and for Kryptonians. On the final night of the training, Jor-El says how proud he is, and he gives him a suit with the House of El symbol on it. Clark returns fully ready to take on Zod. He looks at everyone, not knowing what tomorrow will bring. We see a conversation with Clark, where Clark just goes ahead and says that he loves Lois, and that these past few days getting to know her have been amazing. That whatever happens tomorrow will hopefully not ruin what they have. He knows what he must do. The next morning, Zod returns to Earth. Kal-El, where are you? He yells. Clark lands. Zod laughs, looking at his suit. He says he's glad that Clark is wearing his family's coat of arms. He asks him if he's ready to make the right decision for his people. Clark says yes. As the others are watching in the military truck, they're in shock as Clark joins Zod. Sam is angered. John Jones and Lois give each other looks of concern. Then, we see Clark and Zod beam up to the ship. Dun 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 dun. Clark and Zod walk onto the cockpit. Clark sees a bunch of Kryptonians around. Some are at desks pressing buttons and reading calculations. Zod asks him if he has ever been around this many of his people. Clark tells him that he's never met any member of his species. Zod smiles and says he plans to change that. Zod takes him to another room as Feora leads the crew. Zod begins to explain the destruction of Krypton from his perspective. He paints himself as a hero, a savior who plans to claim Earth and rebuild it as the new Krypton. He explains how they used a Phantom Zone projector that was left in the ship to free themselves. Clark clearly is playing Zod and starts secretly formulating a plan. Meanwhile, the military arrives in Metropolis. Sam Lane tells all troops to begin firing. Lois and Jimmy run up to the Daily Planet and start warning everyone to evacuate. Back on the ship, Clark asks Zod why he wants to kill all these people. Zod simply explains that it's the price to pay. Clark then says that he's wrong. Zod realizes what Clark has done. Clark laserizes Zod. Zod deflects it and shoots back. With both of them using full force, they begin to see cracks in the ship. Feyora warns Zod to stop, but he's too late. The ship begins to fall. Sam tells everyone to run. Clark sees what's happening. He shoots through the cockpit windows and rushes to save as many people as he can. We see no fear in Zod's eyes. As the ship comes crashing onto the ground, Clark comes towards the military. As most of them aim their weapons at him, Sam comes out, telling them to stop. He thanks Clark, but tells him the fight isn't over yet. As Zod comes out of the wreckage, Clark tells them that the only way to stop Zod is to send him to the Phantom Zone. He tells them that he will fight Zod, but someone will have to get the Phantom Zone projector from the ship. As Zod snatches Clark, they have a race through the skies. Lois and Jimmy are still working on getting people out of the Daily Planet. Lois finds Perry White and tells him that he must evacuate. He says no, and then he must get a glimpse of the torpedo. He says they need to come up with a better name. Lois says, "How about Superman?" Perry chuckles and says, "It's too cheesy. It'll never catch on." He reluctantly agrees to evacuate now. Now we see Clark and Zod's fight is destroying buildings. They argue about how Zod is fighting for a fantasy. Zod then blasts Clark out of the atmosphere and into orbit. He hears the voice of Jor-El telling him that his powers are supercharged with the sun. He reenacts when Zod got supercharged, only this time Clark gets it. He blasts Zod straight into the Arctic base. Lois arrives to see the military discussing who will get the projector. Lois volunteers, but Sam declines, saying he doesn't want her to get hurt. She says she won't and goes anyway. She runs into the ship, looking for the projector, only she finds Feyora instead. Feyora pulls her sword out, preparing to kill Lois. Then, suddenly, a hooded figure laser eyes Feyora from behind, and she goes down. He tells Lois to go and save her people. Lois eventually finds the Phantom Zone projector. Zod wakes up to see the Jor-El hologram, who looks in disappointment at him. Zod looks up and sees Clark floating above him. He asks over the earpiece if the plan is ready. He says, "Okay." He flies off and Zod snarls, then follows him. Zod arrives back at the crash site, but Clark isn't there. He looks, but doesn't find anyone. Then, Clark steps out of the shadows to reveal the Phantom Zone projector. He says that he wished his first meeting with his own people didn't have to end like this. Zod pleads for his life as Clark fires and Zod is sent back to the Phantom Zone. The people celebrate, but the damage is done. The city is destroyed. We see a montage of the military helping the reconstruction. Lois publishing a paper reading Superman Saves and Destroys Metropolis. Lastly, Clark, Lois, and Jimmy arrive at a barbecue at the Cunt farm. We see a nice scene with them. Then, Clark gets a beep on a device and excuses himself and flies off. Credits roll. Clark arrives at the DEO headquarters, where John Jones is holding another device. Clark asks him what's going on. He explains to Clark that something is coming, and it's good to have allies. He transforms into a Martian, Green Martian. John says, "Now you see my true form." We see an office with people walking around. One person says, "This is for you, Mr. Luthor." We pan out to see Lex Luthor sitting at his desk with a hologram of Superman and Kryptonite. They pan out to the reconstruction of the LexCorp building. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys have any other ideas of what could have made this movie even better, and maybe some ideas of who you would cast in the roles, maybe different than mine, comment down below that, because that would be great. And also, you may have noticed there's a certain character that I didn't cast at the beginning, and that's actually Lana Lang. Now, I actually couldn't really figure out who I would cast for this role, so this is something that, unlike the beginning, I actually don't have a casting. So again, comment down below who you guys think should play Lana Lang in this. And yeah, that's it. Not much to say there. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. This sets up Lex Luthor as a villain, and yeah, look out in this, and comment down below what you guys might want to see in Batman 2 and any further projects. And comment down below